Hi viewers, and welcome back to the channel. Right, today we're going to do this video which I've called Market Disruptors or Industry Disruptors, about what's going on in the turmoil in the local motorcycle industry here in the UK. I've been watching a few videos about it and people have their own opinions on what's going on with the motorcycle industry, the dealers taking strain, manufacturers taking strain for that matter as well. And a lot of people have put it down to the cost of living crisis. With the increased energy costs, interest rises due to global markets uncertainties, and also just the general state of the economy, leaving us with less disposable income. Yes, I agree that this is part of the problem. However, there is another part of the problem, and I'm going to tell you a little story about my experience with market disruptors. About 10-15 years ago, I used to work for a company. I won't mention the name, but those electricians that are listening in the UK might recognize who they are. We had a range of electrical wiring accessories that you use in your domestic property, the likes of light switches, socket outlets, etc., manufactured in China to sell here in the UK. When these first arrived in the UK, we had these double switch sockets, for example, that were manufactured in China to sell through to the wholesaler, and the wholesaler to sell on to the contractor, and the contractor to install them in your homes. So first of all, the wholesalers would say to us, I'm not sure if the contractor is going to be like these cheap Chinese manufactured products. Cheap Chinese crap, as they call them, excuse my French. And so we said, well, we're going to have a chat to the contractors. So we went along to the contractors and we said to the contractors, here we have a double switch socket manufactured in exactly the same BS standards and approvals as your good old British brands. And the only difference is that you'll buy this double switch socket from the wholesaler at $1.99. Now at the time, a double switch socket from one of the other brands were about £5. So now the wholesaler was able to sell this double switch socket to the contractor for $1.99. So if we go back to the British brands, when the contractor was installing this to your property, that he was buying it from the wholesaler at £5 and selling it to you as part of the project at about £10. So he was making decent profit on it, but now he's able to buy a double switch socket with the same BS approvals that looks on the face of it exactly the same as the British brand products. So the contractor's happy because he's now buying it at $1.99 and still selling it at £10. So he's making massive profits on it. So it didn't take too long for us to convince the contractors to install it. To further convince them, we gave the contractors boxes of double switch sockets and told them to install them to your next project. And it didn't take us too long before we were selling double switch sockets out to the wholesalers in the pallet. So that is my experience in a market disruptor. These guys came in and stole market share from the good old British brands left, right and centre. So much so that Ashley and Rock went into receivership and were bought out by a switchgear manufacturer from Germany called Hager, and MK, a premium brand in the country, was bought out to Honeywell, an American company. If we go back to the motorcycle industry, we go back to what I think is the secondary problem and perhaps more important problem with the motorcycle industry in the UK at the moment, is if we rewind back to the 40s and 50s, we had BSA, Triumph, Norton, Royal Enfield, etc. as good old British brand motorcycles that were selling very successfully and very, very popular throughout the world. Royal Enfield, for example, was sold very successfully into India because they had a major contract with the Indian Army, and the locals saw how good they were, and so Royal Enfield set up a plant in India to manufacture the license. Then in the 60s and 70s along came these Japanese bikes into the UK market, Yamahas, Suzuki's, Hondas, Kawasaki's, etc. But they arrived with increased tech, disc brakes, more reliability, smoother handling, faster, but also cheaper or less expensive. than the good old British brands. So here was a bike that gave you all of that, and you didn't have to have a drip tray to park it in your garage overnight. And it was a bike that you could jump on and go from Land's End to John O'Groats comfortably, knowing that you weren't going to break down. And the dealers took these bikes on, but the British public would say, we're not buying this cheap Japanese crap at the time. Until the Japanese crap manufacturers decided to enter the TT and started winning the TT, the MotoGPs, the Roof of Africas, the motocross foot-up trials, and all of these things were now being won by these Japanese brands. The guys couldn't resist it for too long. It wasn't long before Triumph, BSA, Norton, Royal Enfield took strain. And we know what happened there. BSA closed down, Triumph closed down, Norton closed down. Royal Enfield continued to operate in India and were eventually bought out by the Indians. So the Japanese were major disruptors. In the 70s and 80s, and if we wind forward a bit to the late 90s and the millennium, we saw Royal Enfield coming back into the UK and the rest of the world, where they launched the 350 Meteor and the 650 Continental GT, and then in 2016 the 411 Himalayan. I remember going along to NEC shows when the 411 was just launched, and you could hear people say, I'm not buying that cheap Indian crap, right? Exactly the same thing, history repeating itself. However, if we look at what's happening with Royal Enfield at the moment, they are pretty successful in the UK. If we look at the new bikes that are coming out from Royal Enfield, I've just come back from the Motorcycle Live up in NEC, and they had a massive stand there, and they're doing very, very well in this country. I would suggest better than the other brands, the Suzuki, Yamaha, Hondas, etc. And so if we go to what's happening right up to date, from 2013 we started seeing the Chinese bikes arriving in the UK. And these were manufacturers that were making engines for KTM, Ducati and BMW. They decided they would manufacture their own bikes and launch them throughout the world. They arrived in the UK, the CF Motors, the Vogues, the Zontes, the Benellis, etc. Again, up at the Motorcycle Live, the biggest stand at the show was GB Motor, who are the major importers for CF Motor, Vogues, Zontes and Benellis. The stand was packed to the hilt with people looking at these bikes, because you can now look at a bike, the BMW 900 with the full equipment on it, without the panniers. You're going to be paying in the region of about 20 grand for that. Or you could buy the equivalent bike from the cheap Chinese crap manufacturer with exactly the same engine in it, because they manufacture that engine and the frame for BMW. So it's just the plastics are different. You can buy that for 8.5, 9 grand with the panniers on it. So I mean, the difference is major. And if you look at the YouTube reports on these bikes, they are very, very good. There's not a lot of negatives about them. The only negatives that people are coming up with for these Chinese bikes at the moment is they don't have an established dealer network, which is quite right. However, if we go back a little bit to when Royal Enfield came back into the country with the 350 Meteors and 650 Continental GTs, etc., they had to establish a dealership network as well. But last year, there were 74 established Royal Enfield dealers in the country. At the moment, there are about 62 dealers. And this is because the Royal Enfield dealers that have closed down, that were part of a dealership that had the likes of Suzuki, Yamaha, Honda and Kawasaki in them. So no fault of the Royal Enfield sales, but the fault of the declining sales with the Yamaha, the Suzuki, Hondas and Kawasaki's. So if we look at what's happened there, we've had disruptors from the cheap Japanese bikes, we've had disruptors from the Indian bikes, and now we're having disruptors from the Chinese bikes. So the market has taken major strain. The market will settle down, And eventually, many of us will be riding Japanese bikes, Indian bikes, and Chinese bikes. And European bikes like the BMWs will have to fit into the market somewhere. Yes, it is to do with the economy and the disposable income that we have, or the strain on disposable income we have. I would say even more so to do with the fact that we've had these bikes coming into the market and upsetting the market, and really taking major market share from Suzuki, Yamaha, Honda and Kawasaki. And those dealerships are the ones that are closing down at the moment. We've seen Harley Davidson dealers closing down because nobody wants those big bikes anymore. These guys that have come in, the Royal Enfields and the CF Motors, Vogue, Sontis, their big sellers are the small to medium size adventure tourers rather than the 1200, 1300 adventure tourers. Because people realize that they can do just as much with the small to medium size adventure tourer as they can with the 1200 and the 1300 adventure tourer. The 1300 GSA, 13 grand. A 450 CF Motor 450 with all the toys, that bike cost you 5.5, 6 grand. So it's a no-brainer, really. These guys are really going to be successful. Dealership networks will grow rapidly with these new bikes, and those guys that haven't been able to adapt to the new market will close down. That's my opinion about what's going on with the motorcycle industry at the moment. If you look at my local dealer, his primary range is Royal Enfields. He does have Zontes as his secondary range within the business, but he's not suffering. Yes, his sales are slightly down on last year, but the next year he's going to be flying compared to the guys that are still selling Yamahas, Suzukis, Hondas, etc. So guys, don't be shy, leave the comments down below, and I promise I'll come back to as many as I possibly can. Thanks very much indeed for watching, chaps. I hope you found this very interesting. So hit that subscribe button if you would, just to help the channel grow. And if you want to hear some more interesting videos like this one, hit the bell so that you'll be notified when my next video is coming out. Anyway, thanks very much indeed for watching, chaps. I'll catch you on the next video. All the best. Cheers for now.